Mount Tom in New Hampshire as well. And so we're going to be headed up Mount Tom. Today's not just a hiking day, right? We are going to be hiking, and we're going to be having a great day, but it's not just a hiking day. So we're out here to do a couple of things, one of which is to jump into our mountain weather unit, and another thing is to be collecting data along the way. So we will be making stops along the way. Occasionally we'll stop just to take breathers, catch our breath, that sort of thing, but we'll be stopping to collect some data along the way. The plan is to have lunch probably up around the top, so near the summit or at the summit, and then after that we'll kind of just hustle back down. I think last week the timing worked out pretty well, where we kind of took a while to get up there, and then the way down was kind of just moving back down. So that's what we've got going on today. Before I get too far ahead of myself, right? Before I get too far ahead of myself, what I'd like to do, more than anything else right now, wetter and windier than the valleys below. Mountains are colder, wetter, and windier than the valleys below.
Yeah, actually, I heard on the radio this weekend, like all these people coming in from the city who don't know that mountains have different weather, like a family dressed in shorts.
There have been a lot of rest. So you may have, I don't know if it's really affected Freiburg, but in like just across the border in North Conway, we've had a lot of people that came this summer, and a lot of people that are like living in their second homes and things like that. And so a lot of rescues this summer and this spring so far. Lots of people who, don't realize that mountain weather is different. So mountains are wetter, windier, and colder than the valleys below. Today, the focus for today is we're going to be looking at why mountains are windier than the valleys below. And basically, we're going to look at 3 reasons. And we've got a couple vocab words that I wanted to give you now, and then that way we can fill out later. That's been my new strategy, is to give you a lot of the vocab at the beginning. That's something different this year. I don't know if that's more successful or less successful.
I like it.
You like it? You like that better? I think so too. And then we're just like springing a word on you halfway through the day.
Yeah.
There's this confusing word. So mountains, we said they're wetter, colder, and windier than the valleys below. Today is about mountains being windier, and the 3 reasons why mountains are windier than the valleys below, which are also the definitions we're going to work on, is number 1, the Bernoulli Principle. Bernoulli Principle, that's Bernouli. Bernoulli Principle. Bernoulli Principle.
Can you spell it again, please?
Bernouli. And that's principle like the rule and not like your pal. In case you're curious. Maybe Bernoulli would be your pal, I don't know. But Bernoulli Principle would be 1. The second reason is the Venturi effect. Venturi. It's a good day. I took Italian in college. Bernoulli, Venturi. It's a good day to break out the rust on that.
Can you spell it again?
Venturi. Venturi effect. Bernoulli Principle. Bernoulli. Took 2 years of Italian to get ready to go live in Rome, and then I went to Belgium, where they speak French. Mistake. All right. Bernoulli Principle, Venturi effect. The third reason is the planetary boundary layer. Planetary boundary layer. So what we'll be doing is we'll be stopping along the way and talking about and doing some activities based around these 3 definitions. The other thing that I want you to kind of squeeze in there somewhere that we're going to talk about as well is orographic uplift. O-R-O-G-R-A-P-H-I-C, uplift. Orographic uplift.
Is that all one word?
It's 2 words. Orographic is 1 word, and then uplift is the second word. And that's going to be kind of related to the Bernoulli Principle. Bernoulli Principle, Venturi effect, planetary boundary layer, and orographic uplift. Bernoulli. Bernoulli.
Sounds like we're kind of bonkers.
You know what? I said the same thing to last week's group. I forgot to make that joke. Like, Bernoulli, king of pasta. Right? It's like, I could like even picture like kind of the commercial in my head. And anyway.
Want to ask that for us?
The answer is yes, but I will not subject you to that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take we're going to be taking measurements as we go up the mountain, right? So looking at why mountains are windier than valleys below. And we're going to take our first measurement right here at the trailhead. The elevation right here is approximately so in my notebook, sorry, I know you put it away. In my notebook, I'd write, one, so number one, right? So stop number one, sample site number one, 450 feet. And what we're going to do is in a moment, we're going to split up into 3 groups. Each group's going to get an anemometer. Do you remember from our weather observing, I think it was our observing and forecasting day, we used the anemometers. You just press the center button, turns it on, and you hold it up in the air and that wind starts ripping right through it. It's a little calm today, and you're going to write down whatever the reading is. So the reading here is in miles per hour. And so we're going to have each group take one reading, and I'm going to hand this to you, and we're going to give it like a few, little slight something. I'm going to have, I'm going to give each group a few minutes to see if we can catch a reading.
How many readings are we going to do?
We're going to do, well, it'll be 3 readings at each stop, but you'll, one group takes one reading, second reading, third reading, and we're stopped 3 times. So we'll take one here at 450 feet. We'll take one a little more than halfway up at 800 feet.
Yes.
And then we'll take one at the summit, which is like 1,073?
Something like that.
Somewhere right around there. And we'll take one at the top there. So,
It's like 1,070 feet. It depends on which iPhone you have.
There's a sign there too. I think
It was
there's
weird.
a summit on an elevation on the sign as well. Let's split up into 3 groups real quick. So let's go 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. 2.
3,
6, 1. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. In a few minutes here, I'm going to hand you a slip of paper, and the big thing right now is I want you just to hold it in your hand. Don't crease it, don't bend it, don't crumple it up, don't throw it in the woods, just hold on to it.
let it be.
Let it be. Should have done this before, but that didn't take very long at all. All right.
You want me to pass them out?
Oh yeah, do you mind passing some out?
Small one. Oh, you can have that one. That's that. Landed right in your lap.
Is you're going to take that piece of paper, and what I want you to do in a minute, I'm going to walk around and hand you a piece of tape. And I want you to fold this piece of paper just like this, so the top is rounded. So don't crease the top, right? But have it nice and round, just like that. And I'm gonna walk around, I'm gonna give you a piece of tape. And then once I've done that, what I'm gonna have you do is I'm gonna have you take your pencil, and you're gonna put the piece of paper on your pencil just like that. Does that make sense? All right. So.
I'll make it experience so much pain.
So, we might as well just take a break till right now. So someone just found a tick on them, and I know last week someone as well found a tick on them. So just when you get home today, it's not a bad idea just to check anywhere. I mean, you know, right? Tight constricted areas, so waistbands, socks bands, armpits, behind your ears, anywhere dark, and then anywhere where there's any constriction. So just make sure you check when you get home. And if you don't know this trick, if you have a tick and you pull it off, you can put it in a little piece of Scotch tape like this, and one, it kills them. Two, you can like look at it, which is kind of cool. So like you can like look at it. And three, if this is a tick that's attached, you can send it in to be tested, right? Or you can take it to the doctor. So if like, let's say in a week from now, you develop like a rash or the bullseye, or maybe you just start feeling really awful, you can bring this in, and they can test this tick for Lyme's, or for like Rocky Mountain spotted fever, or you know, whatever. So that way you can they have a better idea of whether or not you might have contracted anything from the tick. So there you go. Would you like to take this? Yeah. So,
A little keepsake from Untitled.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Just check.
Yeah, you don't need to worry, you don't need to freak out, you don't need to be nervous, but just like, you know, you just check. It's just a part of living in this part of the country. It's what it is. You got it? Alright. Okay. Ticks are disgusting.
Is a tick song? Oh.
Okay. So, here's what I'm going to have you do. It's time for our magic trick. In a few seconds, I'm going to have you stand up. You need to move like 10 feet away from everybody else. And what you're going to do is you're going to lower your mask. And you got to get somewhere that's a little, I guess it's maybe even too hard, it's all going to blow away. So find kind of a wind protected spot, maybe behind one of these trees or something. And then what I want you to do is once you take off your mask, is just blow across the top, at the middle, and at the bottom, right up close to your face with a sheet of paper, and just watch what happens and see if you can get the magic trick to work. Something unexpected will happen. All right, so I'm just gonna show you real quick one. I'm gonna see if I can do it. And now that I'm gonna try it, it probably won't work. But if you blow right across the top of the paper, right? Hey! Sorcery! Witchcraft! Stop yelling, Mike. Put your mask on. All right. So what's going on? What do you think?
It's the way the paper is shaped, that the air goes under it in both ways, so that lifts it up because there's more pressure on the bottom.
Oh man, you're like pretty much right there.
It's shaped like an airplane wing, kind of.
It's shaped like an airplane wing. You guys, that's impressive. That was really impressive. So this is gonna be hard to see, but do you see this picture? This is an airplane wing. That's like the front of the plane. That's the back of the plane. So airplane wing, front of the plane, back of the plane. Airplane wing, front of the plane, back of the plane. So as air goes over the airplane wing, right, it has a greater distance to travel because it's going up and over versus the air going under the wing. Does that make sense? Like air that goes under has a shorter distance. Air that goes over has a greater distance. Because it has to cover a greater distance, it increases in speed. So to go over this wing, that air has to move faster. Does that also make sense? And that creates a pressure imbalance. And the Bernoulli Principle states that an increase in speed is accompanied by a decrease in pressure.
write an up arrow.
Oh yeah, we talked about this last week. That's right. Yeah, so like something we talked about, like especially for you that are in 8th grade, going to the academy next year, taking notes, learning little shortcuts.
By decreasing pressure?
Mm-hmm. You could just write like Bernoulli Principle equals, right, speed and a little arrow pointed up, and then pressure, and you draw a little arrow going down, right? So the Bernoulli Principle shows that an increase in speed is accompanied by a decrease in pressure. So what you have is you have a decrease in pressure on top of the wing and an increase in pressure under the wing. If you remember a couple weeks ago, I made you wear silly goggles and we had our archery competition with balloons, and we said we were trying to figure out which way does air move, right? And no one was sucked inside that balloon. And we talked about how air often moves from areas of high pressure to low pressure, or from high pressure to low pressure. So if it's moving from high pressure to low pressure, it's gonna lift. It's gonna lift that wing off the ground, and that plane can fly. So the reason planes fly isn't just because they go really fast, right? Like if you got in your car and drove 500 miles an hour, you wouldn't fly. You'd just probably die. Yeah, you'd probably be a really bad idea. You wouldn't go that far, right?
But if your car had wings.
But if your car had wings
Like shitty thing
that were shaped like this, then it's possible that your car would fly. All right? So that's why planes can fly. How can we connect that to mountains being windier than the valleys below? Let's have a different voice here. Let's have a different voice. What do you think? We talked about as it has to travel up, there's an increase in pressure, right? Or an increase in speed? What do you say?
Longer distance to go up and over than it is to go around.
Yeah, exactly. So let's say that we got a mountain right here. Are you warm enough? Do you put a jacket on?
Yeah, I have a jacket on.
Okay. Let's say we got a mountain right here, and the wind is blowing. That wind that hits the base is going to be forced upward. Now it's got a greater distance to go. So because it has a greater distance to go, it has to increase in speed, right? And what that's going to do is it's going to make those wind speeds as they hit ramp up, and they're going to be forced up the side of that mountain. And that process is called orographic uplift. So orographic uplift is, we can just call it when air is forced up the side of a mountain. And because air is forced up, those wind speeds increase. I have a picture of that. I thought I'd put a picture of that in there.
forced to go up the side of a mountain.
Yeah, when air is forced up the side of a mountain. That'll be good enough for orographic uplift.
It's a nice thing to say. Orographic lifting.
And
I sound really smart for something so simple.
yeah, right?
Concept.
And if anyone's ever, like, if you got on, I bet there have been days where you've stood on Jockey Cap and you've looked out at the, you know, kind of west towards the White Mountains, and you see clouds kind of sitting and spiraling over the mountains, but they never quite get to Jockey Cap. Has anyone ever seen that before? Where you look at the mountains and the mountains are in clouds, but it's blue skies in Freiburg. Have y'all seen that before? Yes?
Yes, Mike, we have.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'm just not sure.
You gotta speak up.
So that's orographic uplift, because those clouds, that wind is forced up. As that wind is forced up, the speed increases. But what happens to that air? As air is forced up and rises, what happens to it?
It's kind of like the Wolf It makes
Well, it rises. Air rises, and it
clouds.
cools, condenses, forms clouds. But then on the backside of the mountain, it starts to sink and warm up again. So one of the coolest things ever is I used to love when I worked in Pinkham Notch. There's a spot that we're going to go to in a couple weeks called Square Ledge. And I used to walk across the street and sit on Square Ledge, and I would just watch these huge clouds roll over Mount Washington. And it looked like any moment we would get drenched in rain, or any moment it would become super cloudy, and they would just dissipate. They just disappear as soon as they crested over. It's really cool. That's orographic uplift. So one reason that mountains are windier than the valleys below is the Bernoulli Principle, which states that an increase in speed accompanies a decrease in pressure, and as those winds are forced up, they have to travel a greater distance and speed increases. It's not super technical, but because of the vocabulary, it can be. Does anyone not understand that concept? Does anyone not understand it? All right. Great. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna start hiking again in here in a few minutes. Hold on real quick. We're gonna start hiking in a few minutes. This is kind of the end of like the more gentle rolling area. From here, it's gonna start getting steep. We'll come down, then it'll start being steep all the way up. If you are a friend that carries any kind of medication like a albuterol or inhaler, and you're like a pre-puff kind of person, right? It's a good time to do that. We're gonna stop again, maybe like halfway between here and the summit for our second reading. We're just not quite high enough here to take another reading here. So we'll stop again in a few minutes. Just hang on to that sheet of paper that I gave you. Oh, I will take those pencils back though. I'll take the pencil back. If I handed you a pencil, I don't remember if I did. If I did, I'll take that back. You got one? I want to point out that Aiden is really good about asking me to repeat. I really like that he always, consistently, if he doesn't catch something, is like, oh, can you please repeat that? I find that very helpful. So rather than like just being like, oh, I don't know, I'll just make up the rest, you're really good about that. So, that was funny. Do you really need it again? That was funny. Lowest part of the atmosphere where air is influenced or affected, right, by friction. Sounds like, how long do I have to lay here? So, if you think about this, wind comes rushing this way, and it hits John's. So here's a big mountain. Here's Mount Washington, and John is like the foothills in Brownfield, right? So here's wind coming here, and some of this wind close to the ground, what's it gonna hit? It's gonna hit his feet. And if it hits his feet, some of that will go over and increase, right, and ramp in wind speed. But a lot of that gets blocked, right? And then it keeps running this way, and it hits his hands, and it hits his hat. And when it does that, when there's a lot of that friction, it gets tumbled up, and it slows down. Does that make sense? Now, that's the air that's down here by John's feet. What about the air that is above his feet and his hat? Is that hitting anything? No. And that wind has a direct shot at our mountain summit. Does that make sense? So all this air hits his feet, tumbled up, hits his hands, hits his hat, tumbled up, right? And then eventually hits the base here, boop, boop, like that. But the air that runs up here has no friction and has a straight shot to go across. So especially, you can get it now, that was great, thank you. Good work, Jeff. Way to lay. So especially if you have summits that have a higher prominence than things around it, like a much higher prominence, those are going to be less affected by friction and have those windier speeds. That's the kind of the picture. So you can see all those arrows gets tumbled up by all the friction. Tumbled up by the friction. Does that make sense? Versus the air that has the kind of straight shot. Okay. 3 reasons why mountains are windier than the valleys below. Last thing we're gonna do before we have lunch is get in those 3 groups, and let's take a reading here, and we'll see whether or not I'm lying to you. Right? 1,073 feet. in elevation.
Okay, there you go.
1,073 feet in elevation. And let's get our first reading from the yellow group. 3.9 from yellow. And from the big anemometer group?
7.6.
7.6. 3.9. 7.6. And registering something for the first time today.
6.8.
6.8.
Whoa.
Oh, coming in big.
Wait, what did the big group get?
7.6.
7.6. So 3.9, 7.6, and 6.8?
Yeah.
And 6.8. So what are we able to deduce from our measurements today? What can we say?
That the higher in elevation you get, the more windier it is.
Yeah, that it seems like Mount Tom is windier than the valley below. There are some things that we can't control though, right? We are taking these measurements at not only different elevations, but at different aspects. So at some, like right now, we're facing more east. Before we were more south. I have no idea which way we were facing in the parking lot. We're also later in the day, right? So there are definitely some things that are kind of could skew the results, but certainly seems like it would be much windier up here. Excellent. All right. Well, let's have lunch. So 6 to 10 feet. And let's eat. And I gotta remember.
It's about 11, 11:30. Yeah.